let's get started. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar titled Major Gift Fundraising, Navigating the Challenges of COVID-19 and Beyond. I'm Tara from the Education and Professional Development team. We're very happy to have you all with us today. Before we start, in the spirit of reconciliation, Fundraising Institute Australia acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Just some quick housekeeping. Today's webinar will be recorded and a link will be emailed to everyone that has registered. Today's presentation will run for about 45 minutes and then there will be time at the end for you to ask the presenter some questions. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please just type them in the chat box at any time during the presentation and Emily will answer them at the end. So today's presenter is Emily Triard, Director Global Philanthropy at Faircom New York. Emily has over 15 years of experience in branding, marketing and fundraising, having worked in both the for-profit and non-profit sectors. Prior to joining Faircom New York, Emily worked in Paris, London and Sydney, where she oversaw the design and implementation of many integrated communication and fundraising campaigns on local and international markets. Emily is a proud Australian citizen, having lived here for 7 years, and she also has extensive experience in the philanthropy sector in the US, as well as in-depth understanding of global philanthropy. Emily, welcome and thank you for presenting today.
Thank you so much, Tara, and hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today to discuss major gifts fundraising in the US and especially how we've been navigating the challenges of COVID-19 and how we're planning for this new normal. I will start by going through this the presentation and what we'll be discussing today. So I will be presenting very briefly who we are to tell you a bit about our agency. We'll talk a bit about our methodology as well. And then I wanted to share with you a snapshot of the fundraising landscape in the US. And I'll go through some major gift strategy and tools, and I will go through some case studies. And then the second part of this presentation will be about the impact of COVID-19 on major gifts and how it has impacted giving in the US and how we helped our clients pivot their strategy. And for that, I will talk about a few clients. So let's get started. So Faircom New York was created about 25 years ago by our president, Corinne Servilly. She's French, and she launched Doctors Without Borders fundraising programs in the US. And in the back of that success, she created this agency. We have around 30 employees in New York. We all speak a few different languages, and we are a fully integrated agency, meaning that we do have in-house designer, digital team, graphist, and copywriter. We have two departments, direct marketing department and a global philanthropy department, which I will be representing today. And we have the pleasure to work across very, very different sectors, including education, health, human services, arts and humanities, and human rights. And some of our clients include Human Rights Watch, Notre Dame de Paris, Mary Stopes USA, Conquer Cancer, and you've probably heard about Catherine Hamlin Fistula Foundation. So I will tell you a bit more about our team, Global Philanthropy team. So we focus on African European organization. I would say that 90% of our portfolio include organizations who do not have an office in the US. And we do have experience on 6 continents, I would say, with clients based in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, in Egypt, in Kenya, and the Senegal. We do have a niche, meaning that we provide our clients services that help them tailor and really tailor their strategy and their message to a US audience. So to tell you a bit more about our methodology, with every new client that come on board, we like to do what we call a feasibility study, because we really need to try and assess the fundraising potential for each organization. During this study, we do look at the landscape, the competitors, potential partners, so that we can then define a positioning that will be unique for this organization. We also provide prospect research services And when I talk about, and I will be talking about prospects a lot during this presentation, I will be referring to foundations, to corporations, and to high net worth individuals. We also do branding and communication, from the creation of a logo to developing brand guidelines. And we also help some clients create some other tools that we call, for example, an advisory committee, and I will talk about that a bit later. We provide board training and coaching session to help some directors of development to prep for some prospect meetings. And we do also guide them through the prospect and donor strategy, to guide them through the cultivation, the solicitation, and the stewardship process. We do also produce several events and special events. I will go into that later. And we also provide digital marketing services. Now, to talk about what the fundraising landscape looks like in the US, so we received the latest data by Giving USA. And this is a snapshot of Giving in the US in 2019. So as you can see, the total contribution represents a bit less than $450 billion. That's a lot. And we saw a growth of about 4.2% from 2018. I can say that overall, for the past few years, there's been an increase in donations. Then the split you can see by a source of contribution, with 69% coming from individuals, 17% coming from foundations. Foundations are a very big part of the landscape in the US, 10% of bequests, and 5% coming from corporation. And I wanted to share with you a split by recipient, by type of organization, with religious organization leading the pack with 29%, and then education getting a lot of donation as well. And then you will have this presentation afterwards, so you can look in more details. And I can answer any questions you have at the end of this presentation. Now, when we talk about major gifts, it's important to talk about what we call the development cycle. And you probably heard about it, but I thought I would explain a bit more what we do here in the US and how we manage this process. So obviously, identification is the prospect research phase. It's looking at hot prospect for an organization. It's also looking at the organization network. Sometimes some board members might have some prospect in their own personal networks that we like to look at. And we do have a lot of great tools here to help us identify those prospects. Information is available in the US. I know in some countries it's a bit more challenging. In France, for example, prospect research can be a bit more challenging, but in the US, we have a lot of database that we use. The Foundation Center is a great resource as well. And that leads us to the qualification. Once you identify those prospects, who are they? So I would call this the profiling phase. And for that, we go deeper into the understanding of who that person we're looking at, who is that person, why we think they would be a good fit to support an organization. And then looking at cultivation, which is a crucial phase, because as you know, it's not because we have a first meeting that someone is going to make a gift. This takes time. Fundraising, major gift fundraising takes time. How are we going to approach that person? It could be on a one-to-one meeting, sorry. It could be a phone call. It could be through an event. Could be asking that person to be a guest speaker to an event as well. So what is the best approach? Then comes solicitation. When and how do we ask for money? This is crucial as well. There are no rules. It's different from an organization to another. In the US, we tend to say that it takes about 18 months from identification to first gift, but that's just an average. Again, we did have some good surprises with some other clients we work with. Institut Curie, a cancer research institute in France. We organized a dinner on year one. One of the guests, a major donor, was very touched by the work that's being carried out by the institute. She had a personal connection and relationship with one of the board members, and she made a really big gift. That was year one, so you never know what happens. But then the challenge is to go through stewardship, because then what you want is a second gift, and the renewal, it becomes really your target. So stewardship is as important, and stewardship is about thanking and reporting and really keeping your donors engaged and informed. Now, in your toolbox for Major Gift, we do like to advise organizations to create what we call an advisory committee. It has different names. You can call it advisory board. It depends on the organization. But what it is that it's a fundraising oriented and a non-executive board. So you would identify 4 to 8 influential members who are mostly chosen for their leadership position in their field and obviously their network. Their main input is really to make available their network of contact and to raise money. We like to mix profile and gather people from different backgrounds, coming from different sectors. So for example, we like to have a journalist, a CEO, an ambassador, because it gives you the opportunity to reach out to as many circles and many networks as possible. Their task is really to promote your organization, to talk about your organization, and to support your fundraising strategy, and to solicit their network to ultimately raise money on your behalf. Now let's talk about who we want in that committee. We talked about people coming from different backgrounds, but we have 3 different profiles. So I will start with the ambassador. The ambassador is interesting and useful in cultivation. So we talked about the cultivation phase. It's very important for him to cultivate your prospective donor, but also is really good at continuing and deepening relationship with existing donor through stewardship, and thereby ensuring gift renewals as well. The advocate, so the advocate is not necessarily a profile that you would add to every committee. You would need an advocate if you are in the human rights space, for example. Advocates are different from the ambassador. They are a bit, they're more vocal. They're more of an activist role. And they love to brag and talk about information and about the organization's latest accomplishments. So they are a bit more in the lobbying type of role, if I may say. But it's important to really have them on board when you work in certain space, like human rights, for example. Now, if you want to keep one profile or pick just one profile, I would suggest you select what we call an asker, because not everybody is comfortable asking for money, and it's a special skill. But the asker in the US usually tend to make a financial contribution to the organization. Makes more sense. Major Gift is about peer-to-peer, fundraising, so it does add more weight if the asker has made a financial commitment, obviously. They are really good with training and role-playing solicitation, and they're good at keeping in mind every detail about every conversation they've had with prospects or donors as well. And what we like to do when organizing or setting up a prospect meeting is to pair askers and ambassador, or asker and advocate, or asker and a staff member, for example. Reason being that while someone can talk about the organization, its mission, its vision, and its impact, then the asker can just focus on going for the ask and renewing the gift or getting the first gift. So I was talking earlier about the fact that we do help foreign organizations to launch their fundraising efforts in the US. Some of them do not have any visibility at all in the US. And it's important that during the feasibility study, we managed to come up with what we call a positioning. The positioning is an internal document, so it's not to be shared with everyone, but it's something that everybody in the organization should have, because really it defines how unique the organization is in comparison to other organizations that will be raising funds in the same space. And I will spend a bit of time here to show you an example. We did work with a non-for-profit based in Kinshasa in the DRC. And Bomoko, the name of this non-profit, was just a name at the time. We were tasked to really combine all the initiatives of Bomoko under that umbrella, meaning that Bomoko is a hospital, Bomoko is a school for boys, they have a school for girls, and it's also a bunch of initiatives in agriculture. So we developed a brand strategy under that umbrella, Bomoko United for Congo. And then at the end of the feasibility study, we did write this statement. Positioning is a statement. I'm not going to read everything, but I read what I highlighted because those are the main points that we wanted to convey. So its unique threefold approach promotes equal access to health, education, and sustainable agricultural solutions. So we're talking about the model that Bomoko represents. Its unique human-centered model puts Congolese people at the heart of everything it does. Its human-centered model. So the ambition of Bomoko is really to empower Congolese to take matter in their own hands. And that's why Bomoko is building towards a stronger future for Congolese, powered by Congolese. Based on that positioning, we then developed a tagline that will then be communicated throughout all the collateral and communication tools we developed afterwards, which is unlocking a better and brighter future for the Congo, driven by the Congolese. And then we developed a case for support. Now, having a case for support is very important. That will be the tool you will give your ambassadors, your askers, and your advocate when they go to meetings. It's something you leave behind. It's also something you can send as a PDF when you're trying to reach out to prospect and potential donors. This is a document that needs to be short, 4 to 6 pages. It's usually like a brochure. And really, it talks about who, what, and why an organization is and how it's impacting people's life. So it talks about impact because major donors really want to know where their money is going. They want to know, they want to be part of your story. They want to know exactly and concretely what is going to happen once they make a gift. They really want to be informed. It has to be as concrete as possible. So it really speaks to impact here. And I wanted to talk a bit about events. Obviously, things have changed, and since COVID happened. But we do hope that we'll be able to organize a few events soon, smaller ones in the US. But I would like to give you 3 different types of events and then illustrate with 3 different examples, because events are a great tool for cultivation and fundraising. We do organize intimate small events. So we call them VIP dinners, could be breakfast, could be lunch. But these are really an opportunity for representative of an organization to meet with high prospect and high profile donors. And I will give you an example of that later. We also organize mid-size, we call it a publicity event. So this is more press conference, exhibition, panel discussion, and roundtable discussion. These are really to raise visibility, raise awareness. This is not directly linked to any fundraising effort, but it's part of your communication strategy. And large-scale fundraising events such as galas and cocktails, which are very famous in the US. I mean, before COVID, there were 2 gala seasons, as we say in the US, one in spring from April to June, and one from October to December. And these are the busiest time for charities in the US. Now let's talk about this small type of VIP event that can be very useful for an organization. We have the pleasure to work with the Nelson Mandela Foundation. This is a really big brand. Everybody knows about the Nelson Mandela Foundation. So visibility is not an issue here, but they don't have a permanent presence in the US. They don't have an office. So they really rely on Selos Atang, the executive director, coming to the US several times a year to meet with donors and potential donors as well. So our role was really much about identifying those new prospects and helping him with the cultivation process with current donors. So we did identify Atlantic Philanthropies during our prospect research. I mean, the initiatives is now closed, but at the time, and they were already planning on wrapping up their operations, we did find that there was an opportunity for the Nelson Mandela Foundation to partner with Atlantic Philanthropies. So what we did is that we organized a very intimate, exclusive VIP dinner. We had less than 14 people, with obviously a strategic placement of Celo. I will show you some pictures. and also Graça Michel, the last wife of Nelson Mandela, who came for that event. And this was really a very special moment for everyone. People feel like it's a very exclusive event, and therefore a lot of discussion happened around how and what would a partnership look like between the two organizations. Now, obviously nothing happened just then, but after ongoing discussion, other meetings and other events, then they created the Racial Equity Fellowship Program, a 10-year program, which granted the foundation with $60 million. So this type of events is very important to have in your toolbox. It also speaks to how long it takes and how much cultivation is important in the process when trying to get funds. I'm going to go back to Bomoko. The Bomoko is different. Bomoko, no visibility, brand new organization to the US market. So our challenge was to identify prospects. We did create an advisory committee as well. It was very important. The advisory committee really is your team on the ground, because when you don't have an office in the US, you need people on the ground. As an agency, we do not raise funds on behalf of our clients. We're just behind the scene. That's why we really need those ambassadors to do the work for them. And we organized a series of events and really developed strategic partnerships, which I will describe now. So how do we raise funds for the Congo? That's the first question we asked ourselves. The Congo, it's not a country you hear a lot in the news. It's very hard to have information on what's really happening in the country. It's very hard to travel to. Even for my team and I, we did a site visit, and it took 3 to 4 months before we could get a visa. And even when you're there, you really need someone there to guide you through Kinshasa. So it's challenging, but what we knew in 2018, we knew that in December, Kabila would step down and organize elections, and everybody was really waiting for these elections. And we knew that a month prior, if not before that, the media will cover it in the US. There was a lot of discussion in the US about the elections. I must say that a lot of the time, the questions that was asked was, is the elections going to be a rigged election? A lot of conferences happened, and we thought, okay, we need to build from that momentum to organize our own event and have Bomoko as a presenter of a discussion around the election. And so in Washington, DC, we chose Washington, DC for a reason, because it's the city where you have all of the consulate, embassies, so it's more of a politician, the networking, and you have a decision maker there. So on December 6th, we organized a press event at the National Press Club. And during our prospect research, we identified a former US ambassador, Honorable Herman Cohen, who is passionate about the Congo. He's been there many times. He wrote many books. And he agreed to be Bomoko's ambassador. He was there to give an opening speech. We also decided to partner with another organization. And that's what I mean by strategic partnerships. We often advise organizations who are just new to the US market to sometimes partner with bigger ones or other organizations. Doing like a co-branded event, for example, because you do benefit from partnering in the fact that they will bring their guests and they will bring some prospects. So collaborating on an event is always very fruitful. And to do that, we reached out to an organization called The Century. The Century is an initiative that was initially created by George Clooney with his friend John Prendergast. John Prendergast then created his own non-profit dedicated to fight corruption in Africa. It's called the Enough Project. And Sarah Gardiner, one of the investigative analysts, agreed to be on our panel conversation to give her, her insights and her experience on this type of election. So that was very interesting, and we managed to get a really good connection out of it for Bomoko, in fact. And in trying to raise Bomoko's profile in the US, we also saw an opportunity for Ginette Mokoka. who's the development director, to be a guest speaker. So there are different ways to use events as a tool for connection and to raise your profile. We organize our own events or we attend other events, and being a guest speaker gives you great visibility. So we identified several events in New York and DC, and Ginette was invited to be on a few panels. So that was a really great opportunity for her. She was invited to speak at the Congolese Diaspora Summit in New York. We knew that a lot of foundation would be there. She made some really good connection as well. That day she talked in particular about women empowerment in the DRC. That was one of the main topic, and also maternal health. And so she's on the picture, obviously, with one of the member of the foundation that she was speaking with. And I'm going to talk about another great organization, another challenge. It's called IHES. It's Institut des Hautes Études Scientifiques. So it's a French mathematics and theoretical physics research institute located outside of Paris. So obviously no visibility whatsoever in the US when we started our collaboration. And we actually wondered how we would raise money for mathematics. Another question before we started our feasibility study. But what we quickly learned is that mathematics and algorithm are used in the finance sector, stock exchange. So that really led our prospect research toward the finance sector, which is where we identify, which is now who is now their biggest support, an American mathematician billionaire who's also a hedge fund manager. And this example will show you also how long it takes to get the first gift. So we approached him, we did a little VIP dinner, we invited him and a few of his friends. The team at IHES flew from France, and they talked about IHES and the work they do. And then they kept, building that relationship. They went back to France, they kept in touch. And then the following year, he actually suggested to pay for the full amount of the other event we were organizing at the time. So he was the sponsor of our event. And then on year 3, he actually made his first commitment, which is renewed every year. And every year we organize a gala. Now we gala with more and more people. Last year we had, I think, 250 people. But this is really a classical cycle where, you go through identification, you do your profiling, and then your cultivation, you do the ask, and then stewardship happens. And it's been going on for 5 years now. These are some examples. Every year we have fun looking and doing, working on a theme, because I would say that it's not just about organizing a big dinner, it's also about telling a story. So what story are we gonna tell our guests this year? Because that story and the theme will also feed into the prospect research you'll be doing to build your guest list, of course. Now, the second part of our presentation, I wanted to share with you what we know so far when it comes to the impact of COVID-19 on major gifts. Obviously, we'll need to wait until later to have the full impact for 2020. But what we know, obviously the government has been very helpful, and they've quickly implemented a new legislation to make available an additional $321 billion for small businesses and charities. If you want to know more about that, I put a link to our website where we give more details on that new legislation. We know that individual giving has increased, especially thanks to higher average gifts. We also know, obviously, that human services and international relief organizations are seeing the biggest gain. I must say as well that across the board, looking to date at revenue for our clients, a lot of them have been doing really good. So it's good. It's not the disaster that everybody was predicting so far. Now, foundations. In that landscape, things are changing fast It was something that people were waiting for, but I think that COVID-19 kind of accelerated the process. So, and a lot of foundations were very vocal about it. Darren Walker, the president of the Ford Foundation, was really pushing for those changes. So we know that 5 foundations, for example, you know, the Doris Duke Foundation, the Ford Foundation, Kellogg Foundation, MacArthur and Andrew Mellon, they all increased their combined giving by more than 1.7 billion over the next 3 years. But there was also a need to change some of the process. And to date, we know that 775 American and international foundations have made a commitment, a pledge, signing the Council of Foundation COVID-19 pledge that will take, that, you know, means that they're taking a lot of different steps to streamline some processes. I've included 3 of them. There are many others, but importantly, they loosen or eliminate the restrictions on current grants. They want to make new grants as unrestricted as possible and reduce requests of nonprofit partners. That would include postponing reporting requirements and site visits, obviously. So things are changing. Maybe one of the good or the positive effects of this crisis. But now I wanted to talk about share with you 2 case studies. I will speak about Mary Stopes USA and how we shifted their strategy, and Notre Dame de Paris as well. I will start with MSI. We've been working with MSI since 2019, and we've been organizing a series of events in NYC and in the Hamptons. We have identified in the Hamptons some potential donors who do have a second house there and where they vacation in summer. So we did a little event there in July. We also did a lot of prospect research, and we were really helping the gift officer with her major donor cultivation strategy. And we also helped you know, developing several communication tools as well. So this event was organized last year, and it was in partnership with the Center for Reproductive Rights. So it's the same idea that I mentioned earlier with Bomoko, where we partnered with the Sentry. We thought it would be a good idea to partner with another organization so that we could all bring guests and prospects in the same room and have a conversation. It's about having a conversation. You really want to give people content that they can relate to and really make, you know, have a voice and stand out from your competitor by partnering with another organization. That's very powerful message that's been sent. And I know that MSI made a lot of really good connection there as well. And unfortunately, all of the event we had planned, the series of in-person events we were planning for Boston, New York, and Washington, had to pivot. We didn't want to cancel. We had to find a way to stay connected, help MSI prospect, even if it was a challenge, and keep their donors engaged and help them with their cultivation strategy. So what we did first is to actually look at middle donor, and we launched a giving circle, the Blue Door Society. And then we organized, we completely switched to digital, and we organized a series of virtual roundtables. So when prospecting is a challenge, and when you can, because you have a good size donor database, I would say, you want to look at your middle donors because they do provide a great bridge to future major giving. So it's about how do we upgrade? How do we look at this and see if there is potential? And that's why Giving Circle is very useful. So we built a strategy that would every year put a spotlight on a country or a specific region, and we personalize the message with characters from the field program. We're bringing the field to people. That's the idea behind it. So Blue Door Society was designed to do just that. I will let you read the different levels between the advocate and going to the vanguard at, you know, level as well. But this was very successful, and this is a strategy that is again really interesting when prospecting is a challenge. You look at your own database and see where potential lies. And then we organize virtual roundtables, again with the same idea that we really wanted to bring the country to donors and to prospect. We organized a series of roundtables, probably about 2 a month, from May up until tomorrow. And the last one will be in October. We invited MSI representative from Zambia to talk about what they do, how COVID has impacted them, from Nigeria, from Senegal. And we were not sure, how successful this would be. Everybody was doing virtual events. And yet I must say that people were really engaged. It was a decent sized event. I mean, it's not a webinar style, it's a conversation, it's a discussion. We wanted about 15 to 20 people, and we did just that. And I must say that it was good for our cultivation, prospection as well. But we were mindful of the audience, because for some events we wanted to speak to foundation and individual. These are 2 different audiences, so we did just 2 different events and 2 different topics as well. So I will show you a little example. So the top one is the invitation for the event with Zambia. Tomorrow we actually have an event for the Blue Door Society members. It's called the State of Reproductive Freedom. So it's really a presentation done by Marjorie, the president of MSI, to keep her, the member informed on what's happening, especially this year, because as you know, we have presidential election happening. And on the left side, we did another event. This event was a project by one of their board members. She was really, really helpful. She knows very well Pat Mitchell. Pat Mitchell is quite famous here in the US. She's dedicated to women empowerment. She's a co-chair of TEDx Women. She agreed to be an ambassador for that event, and she said a few words. She gave an amazing testimonial about her personal experience with MSI, and we had a discussion with the Sahel, Zambia, and Uganda. It was very interesting, and we did a second one on the back of that one, because we found that people were really really engaged again. And to finish this presentation, I will speak about Notre-Dame de Paris. So Notre-Dame de Paris, we started working with them before the fire, because the cathedral was already in desperate need of repair and renovation. We helped identify some, ambassadors and askers for Michel, who you can see on the picture. Michel Picot is the president of Friends of Notre-Dame de Paris, and he and André, it's only the 2 of them running to raise funds from the US, so they really need help here. And they made really good connection in 2018 through events that we organized at the consulate, at the embassy. In fact, Anne-Claire Legendre, French consulate, agreed to also be an ambassador for us. So sometimes we find that it's useful to go through local, I would say, local consulate or embassy, because they do have an important network as well that you can tap into. But then a year after, unfortunately, as you all know, a terrible fire destroyed a big part of the cathedral. So we had to prepare for a response, an emergency response. Gifts were coming from everywhere. It was not just about major gifts anymore. We received donation online. People were sending checks, people were sending cash. So we had to really centralize everything. But it also meant that we needed to expand our strategy and to broaden our scope of work. So we decided to launch a direct marketing campaign to grow the donors, the donor base for Notre-Dame in the US. We obviously developed a website and implemented a digital strategy. And we did a series of VIP events. The one you see on the screen was sponsored by Chateau Margaux, the wine company, and we managed to gather at, we privatized the restaurant, and we gathered, I would say about 40 high net worth individuals. And thanks to that event and thanks to Chateau Margaux, a lot of money was raised to support the reconstruction efforts for Notre Dame. But then a year later, COVID happened. So it's almost a year when Michel was supposed to travel to the US, and we had a full calendar of events, the celebration of the 1-year anniversary of the fire. So we had to find a solution, and how do we pivot? So same as for MSI, Notre Dame has a lot of donors in the US now, so that they can build from that. So we looked at the middle donor segment, and we wanted to launch a giving circle for Notre Dame, because that's how really, it's a really good tool to build donor engagement, and also it builds long-term loyalty and support. So we looked at different dates, and we remembered that the construction of Notre Dame probably began between the 24th of March and the 25th of April, 1163. So we called our giving circle the 1163 Society. And so I wanted to share with you the different levels, and I will let you read all of the benefits. But just to say that we had fun also with the name of each level. We have the artisan, the builder, the mason, architect, patron, and for people giving $10,000 and plus, they'll be part of the Quasimodo circle. So they will get all of the benefits of the different levels, plus exclusive Friends of Notre Dame de Paris VIP event, which will be virtual for now, but that leads me to our current project, which is the first virtual gala organized by Friends of Notre Dame de Paris. We're quite excited. It will happen on October 29, and not a lot of people have seen this invitation. Not that it's confidential. I mean, we're already reaching out to people, but we haven't shared it with a lot of people. I wanted to share it with you today. This was a project that one of their board members really wanted to produce with us. And she did a great job at, getting a lot of artists to take part of this virtual event. She managed to get a performance from Yo-Yo Ma. Glenn Close will say a few words, and we're very happy that there will be an amazing program. William Harvey as well. There will be a virtual tour of the cathedral, and Guillaume Lacroix, the consul of the French consul in Chicago, will say a few words as well. Everything will be pre-recorded, and we're producing at the moment all the elements, and we have been already receiving and selling a lot of tickets. So it seems to be, it's going well. So we're quite excited. And I'll let you read the different sponsorship opportunities. I mean, the ticket price ranges from $5,000 to $100,000. And I would like to wrap up with a few key takeaways before I answer any questions you may have. I would say it's important to keep your board members engaged, as I said, for MSI and for Notre Dame de Paris. Their board members were really helpful in organizing events. They can be very, very helpful in time of crisis. I would suggest to create, if you can, an advisory committee, or at least identify some ambassadors, advocates, or askers to really support your fundraising efforts. And I'm giving this advice because I know it works in the US, but it also works in France and other countries as well. And look at, building a mid-level giving program, because as we discussed before, middle donors are a really big bridge to your major giving. So thinking about upgrade is important. And I would say to create a successful virtual event, it's important to pick the right guest speaker. So who is going to be appealing to your audience? Decide on the right size or format, because there are many different sizes. You want to do a webinar with 100 people? Do you want to do a smaller, more VIP virtual event with private room, private chat room? That's very important as well. And carefully choose your audience and topic. So what topic will be engaging for individuals, or what topic will be engaging for foundation, for example. And I think that's it for today, Tara.
Thank you so much, Emily. I've got a few questions that have come through to me in the chat, but if anyone has any further questions, please enter them either to the group or directly to me, and I'll keep an eye on them. So first question I've got, Emily, from Marie is, can you tell us a bit more about the tools that you're using for prospect research?
Absolutely. So I was saying that it's easy in the US to find information on anyone. I guess everything is public. So what we like to use are a few resources. So I would say the Foundation Center is really good. We do like Wealth Engine as well, that helps profile prospect donors with really detailed information about their capacity to give, because that's an important information to have. WealthX is really good. WealthX is actually international. So when we do prospect research outside of the US, we love WealthX, because I know that, for example, right now we're looking at Asia, and they do have an amazing database for international prospect research.
Cool. Thanks, Emily. A new one just came through from Ruth. Hi, Emily. What is the budget for the Notre Dame campaign, and what is the expected ROI?
Yes, that's a very good question. So in terms of budget, I would talk about the amount that needs to be raised. In fact, for the whole project of the reconstruction, we need to raise $120 million. But that's a lot of money, because at the moment the reconstruction has not started. It's really just still what we call the securing phase, so making sure that we can rebuild. In terms of budget, I would say for Notre Dame expenses, it's really just, I would say, our services, because everything we provide afterwards is, the tools, like your ambassador who will be raising funds. The event that we're doing it's on a platform that was paid for by the board member. She's a great supporter of Notre Dame de Paris. So it's really not a big budget, really. So we're hoping that we will reach the target.
Thanks, Emily. I've got another question here from Josh. Have you ever found an organisation that hasn't passed the feasibility test?
That's a question that comes up very often. So actually, no. And we always do a feasibility study, because we really can't say, even by experience, if an organization will be successful or has the potential. But luckily, in my experience, we never had to tell someone this is not going to work, there's no potential at all. So no.
Excellent. I have another one here from Kim. Emily, do you currently work with Australian clients?
So we did, up until June, we had the pleasure to work with Catherine Hamlin Foundation. They were our first Australian clients. And we did a really big feasibility study for the US and Canada as well. And then worked on their positioning, case for support. We did a lot of prospect research for them, and we set up a lot of, so it was just after COVID happened. So we set up a lot of Zoom and Skype calls with prospect, and they're really expanding their network in the US at the moment.
Thank you. I've got one more here coming through from Mark. Why would American donors give to a foreign organization?
Good question. So yes, so it's about prospecting and really profiling your potential donors. I would say that it goes beyond being American or French or Australian. Really, it's the way we look at prospects is what they like, what is their philanthropic history, for example. So for Notre Dame de Paris, we didn't look at American, we narrowed it down. We looked at Catholic groups, we looked at French American. So you need to you need to develop a profile that will tell you what's about that person, not just about America, but mostly what does he like, what is he passionate about. So is he passionate about history and I would say, heart and culture, and so it's about what their interests are, and that's where you create the relationship and you assess that there is a good fit between that prospect and your organization.
Thanks, Emily. I have another question here from Damien. Says, thanks, Emily, for a great presentation. In the US, there is a different giving culture. For example, nonprofit board directors are expected to give. What is your experience of board gifts in other countries?
Yes, absolutely. Give or get out, they say here. It's a bit brutal, but it's true. And it's the same with the asker in your advisory committee. It's always better to show a financial commitment if you're going to ask someone to commit as well. And it is very different. So I must say in France, it's a different story. We did have this conversation when I was working in Paris with some of our clients. They didn't feel comfortable asking their board members or advocates or ambassadors to give money. I think because, to your point, fundraising culture is very different in the US and other countries, and I can see a big difference from in France and the US. That's very interesting. Here, it's almost a given that someone from the board will make a donation. All of the board members, American board members of Friends of Notre Dame de Paris have made financial commitments. But in France, I must say it's not always the case, if ever. It doesn't mean they don't raise money and it doesn't work well, obviously, but it is very different, yeah.
Thanks, Emily. Another question just came through from Nikki. Says, hi, thank you. In terms of tax deductibility for an American donor to an Australian organisation, how do you get around this issue?
Yes, absolutely. So what we did with Kathleen Hamlin Foundation and what we do with a lot of foreign organizations, well, there are two ways. You could set up what we call the 501c3, which gives you the foundation status, but it does take a lot of time. You do need a board and it has a lot of requirements. So what we always advise newcomers to the US market is to go through what we call a fiscal sponsor. So you would go to a foundation, and we work a lot with the King Baudouin Foundation. I can share the details with you if you're interested, which would be your fiscal sponsor. So you would be registered with them, and people would give money to King Baudouin Foundation, who will then send the money to you. And the King Baudouin Foundation will send the receipt, the tax receipt on your behalf.
Thanks, Emily. Another call just came through from Lisette. With your virtual Notre Dame event, you said there were different ticket prices. So do they get additional access if they pay more, for example, different speaker or tour?
Thank you for asking. Yes, we are actually working on just that at the moment. There will be we do some private with some platform. You can have private chat and private room, and for some of the I would say the higher level tickets and sponsors, they will have the opportunity to speak to some of the performers, for example. But we're still deciding on that. But definitely, yes.
Thanks, Emily. If anyone has any further questions, please just send them through to FIA and we can pass them along. But Emily, thank you again for a terrific webinar. We're grateful to you for sharing your expertise with us today. And thank you everyone for attending. Again, this webinar has been recorded and we'll be sending a link out to everyone who registered as soon as it's available. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tara. Thank you, everyone.